Well, good morning from Knox County, Illinois. This is BASF Innovations in the Field I'm Grant Strum. It is Sunday morning, September 20th, 2015, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a harvest update followed by a few other items of interest. Harvest has started and is pretty well in full swing in our area of the world. Most of the farmers in the area have started corn harvest this past week. Some started the week before. If they have not started, they will be starting this next week. Corn is drying down at a pretty rapid pace with all the heat and dry weather we had the last couple of weeks. Finally, we're fortunate to catch some rain here over the weekend. Our area was actually in some of the lighter amounts of rain here in Illinois. We were more from 8/10 to about 1 inch and 2, inch and 3. Areas to our north had 3+ inches. Areas to our south had 3+ inches. So there were some heavy storms that did go through. The weather the last week felt like mid-July. The humidity and heat was really on us, and the corn looked like it was the second week of November. The corn has died very quickly, especially in areas that we were dry the last 30 to 45 days. A lot of premature death in the corn. Definitely has affected some yield. In some of those areas, I feel we've given up probably 10 to 15 bushel of yield in the last 30 or 45 days, just because we've been so dry and the corn matured just a little too quickly here towards the end. We do have some isolated areas that caught a lot of rain in the last 2 or 3 weeks of July that we didn't catch on our main farm here, and it's really interesting that that corn planted just within a 2 or 3 day window of the corn planted close to where I'm sitting now, and it's much more green. It's going to have a lot more kernel depth, and I think we'll have a 10 to 15 bushel advantage in those areas that caught some of those late rains. So it's going to be a really interesting variance once we move through harvest. Like I said, we have started corn harvest to a small extent. We're maybe 6 or 7% in. We've been focusing on some flood damaged corn on our river bottoms that we knew we couldn't wait too long to get out. That corn did a little better than expected. It's really hard to measure when you have bare spots with no crop, than some spots that were damaged by water, other spots that were undamaged, so really a high variance. Some of the upground we've picked that had little to no water damage is yielding really well. Not quite what last year's yield were at this point for us. I'd say we're probably somewhere in the 3 to 5% range behind last year, but if we can hold this kind of pace, it'll still put us one of the better corn crops we've had in the last 5 to 10 years. That's just yet to realize how relative good we were last year with the record corn crop in our area last year. We have noticed that so far the test weights have been better than last year, but the kernel size and kernel mass is definitely down from last year. A lot of our yield last year came from the size and the depth of the kernel. Don't have that this year. A lot of that's due to the late dryness we had and a little bit of premature death, maybe some nitrogen loss in some areas. But the test weights so far have been coming in surprisingly good for what we were kind of anticipating. Just a few soybean fields have come out in the area I've heard some yield reports on. So far, they've been surprisingly good, the yield reports I've heard. Our soybeans looked terrible for a long time this late spring, early summer, and they seem to have bounced back, and the yields seem to be pretty decent in the area I'm anxious to get started. Probably end of this week, early next week, we'll start hammering out some soybeans. Something else I like, this topic that's always interesting to me is kind of the research and making decisions for the next crop year based off what you've seen this crop year. If you're like me, this time of year you get lots of stops by salesmen, you get lots of stuff in the mail, and it's really kind of hard to filter through all the things and all the possibilities, whether it's seed brands or types of treatments to put on or types of fertilizers to put on in the fall. You get lots of different things thrown at you this time of year. And let me start off by saying there's only one set of research that I completely 100% trust, and that's the research we do on our farm. And I hope all of you are trying to do some sort of research on your farm to compare varieties, compare farming practices, to see what really works well for you. Because it's easy, every seed company can send you a piece of plot literature that has their varieties winning. It's kind of comical to see, because it's like everybody's winning every plot when we know that's not always possible. So really filter through the information you get. Use it as kind of a baseline, but you really need to make decisions based on what you're seeing on your farm. And there's been a lot of situations that everyone tells me about how good a variety is. said this is the best variety of bean, this is the best variety of corn I've ever planted. It's one of my best every year. I'll plant that same variety and just cannot get the same results out of it. Whether it doesn't like our farming type of practice or our fertilizer program or whatever the case may be, for some reason those varieties don't always work for us. So I really want to stress the importance of doing side-by-side trials. A large majority of our fields, we have side-by-side yield trials with varieties or different treatments or fungicides or nitrogen practices in our fields, and those are that's the research I really try to take into account. So know what works on your farm, because you're the only one that knows what works on your farm. The seed salesmen tend to think they always know what works on your farm. Find the ones you can trust, build a relationship with them, and building that relationship is important, because once I build up some trust with a salesman or a certain seed company, I can trust a little better what they're coming out with next. But there's always a situation, they'll tell me this is the next big thing, and it's not the next big thing for us. Maybe it is for somebody else. But you always want to do that research and kind of step in and try it yourself before you necessarily trust anyone else 100%. So those are just some tips that I kind of go by, and there's just nothing that replaces your own on-farm research. Just another quick note, we're starting to get into some of our yield comparisons on corn. We've obviously done some variety comparisons and some farming practice comparisons. Two single biggest things I'm seeing at this point this year is fungicide is paying off huge in corn. I've seen the trials for one. I've seen the results on our own farm. Fungicide paid off, especially with the headline AMP for BASF that we used, paid off really, really well. So really happy with that decision. Also, late season nitrogen is paying off. We're seeing a lot of our fields, the headlands had all the nitrogen on up front. The middle of the field, we did side dress passes, and we're seeing 10 to 15, 20 bushel in some cases with the late nitrogen applications. So that's not always the case every year, but this year those two things so far are really showing up. Once we get into more of the meat of harvest, I'll definitely report back on some of the finer details of what we see in the field so far. But for now, that's all I have to report, and hope everyone has a safe and healthy harvest.